Hello and welcome to the first meeting of our CKAD study group. I'm very happy that all of you are here. I see more and more people are connecting, so we will wait a minute or two and then we will start our first meeting. In the meantime, please type in the chat where are you from. Mostly I'm interested in the time zone you are in, so I can, schedule future meetings for the time that will be best both for me and you also. I see Marcin, which is the quite Polish name, so probably from Poland, but let's wait for others and just type where are you from and what time zone is the preferred one for you. Okay, so before we begin the formal part of our meeting, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Łukasz Tomaszkiewicz. This is quite Polish name, so you can call me Luktom if you are from outside Poland. And then I think it will be easier for you to call me Luktom. I help developers and DevOps engineers to accelerate their career in the clouds. How do I do it, you may ask? Actually, I run YouTube channels. I've recently started one in English. It's called Luktom Cloud /YouTube. And also for almost 2 years, I've been running a Polish channel called Kursy Cloud /YouTube. I highly encourage you to subscribe both, or at least the new one if you are talking only in English. Click the subscribe button below and you will get notified about new materials I'm going to publish soon on that channel. I also create online courses. So far I created 2 of them. First one is called kursterraforma.pl and it covers all the basics of infrastructure provisioning using, in my opinion, best tool for doing that. That is called Terraform. The second course I so far published is Ścieżka dewelopera w chmurze AWS, which we can translate into English as Path of AWS Developer. And that course is focused, and the target group are developers who want to take their skills to the next level and start creating cloud-native application. It introduces my students to all the basic services in AWS, both the ones related to the compute as well as storage and networking, so you can quickly start developing applications for the cloud. I also run on-site workshops from time to time, so if your company needs a dedicated training, you may contact me and then we will set the details and talk about the agenda that you would like me to do for your people. And I also create software. Actually, since I was, I don't remember, 7 years old, I create software. It was somewhere around 1995, because I remember Windows 95 at that point. I also in my career ran 2 software houses, which were focused mainly on financial customers, financial institutions. We created, for example, exchange offices as well as software for brokerage houses and some pretty neat platforms like the platform for trading on the macroeconomical events. So it was quite cutting edge technology at the time. I see that we've got, of course, people from Poland, but also from India, England, as well as Dallas. Oh, hi. And Scotland. That's great. That's great. Hello, everyone. Okay, so and I also work as Senior Cloud Infrastructure Architect at AWS. It's been almost 2 years of my career there. And I'd like to welcome all my colleagues from AWS. Some of them are here as well. Now, let's quickly summarize my friendship with Kubernetes. So actually, I've got, I can say, hate-love relationship with Kubernetes because I really love that tool. And at the same time, I'm fully aware that the Kubernetes is not necessarily the best tool for most of the customers. There are simpler tools, there are tools that are more cost efficient and easier to maintain. However, Kubernetes became very, very popular and more customers are interested in that. So it's worth to know it. So I've got a couple interesting cases with Kubernetes in my career. A couple of years ago, I worked for a big enterprise customer. It was a financial institution from UK. And for that customers, we deployed 20 plus clusters to support deployment of the different application the customer had. They were divided to 2 or 3 environments, I don't remember exactly, but there were a lot of clusters. The interesting part here is that also whole CI/CD part was hosted on Kubernetes cluster, and it auto-scaled, and it was quite nice solution, I can say. We spent 1.5 years deploying all that stuff, but it was worth it, I can say. I also worked on hosting of WordPress on Kubernetes. It was also quite nice and quite challenging project because as you may know, WordPress not only needs a MySQL database, but it also stores some file on the disk. So we actually had to work out some solution to be able to not only store the data on some kind of volume, but also share the data between different nodes and different pods in case scaling was needed. So it was quite a nice thing, but it was nicely automated after all. I also worked for many startups. My main trick was one-day deployment of infrastructure. So using both Terraform as well as Kubernetes, we were able to start the infrastructure for new bootstrap or provision the infrastructure for new customer during the first day of the development. So actually on the second day, developers were able to ship the first versions of applications and to show that to the customer, for example, work on the UI side. And I also had one simple story with Edge, and by Edge here I mean Raspberry Pi and similar devices. I worked for one customer for which we created a solution that was based on the Kubernetes, but it was very interesting case because it had to work also in offline mode. So basically, the cluster was from time to time connected to the internet, but we also needed to support all the things related to actually enabling Kubernetes working without an internet connection, which is quite a tricky thing to do. Also, there were a couple of nice cases, for example, how to restart host operating system from the pod. It was very interesting use case. Oh, I see that we've got Kaiser from California. Wow. What time is it at your time zone here right now? Because I assumed it's 7 or 8 hours. Okay, so that's the summary of my friendship with Kubernetes. And before we dive deep into the details for today's meeting, which are, today meeting will be dedicated for the CKAD exam itself, how it looks like, what you can expect, and a couple of tips for it. Let's think for a little, for a while, why to get certified. I again ask you to write on the chat your reasons why you want to get certified, why you want to get certified in the Kubernetes especially, and why you decided that CKAD may be interesting for you, not, for example, a different certification. I'm very curious what's your reasons for getting certified. I've got a couple of dozen seconds of lag from what I see, so you will probably hear me after about 1 minute. So it takes, some time for me to respond and not notice your chat messages. So I'll simply move forward and will write your reasons in a minute. Here are my suggestions of why you should get certified. First, certification is a great demonstration of your level of knowledge. So actually, if you have a certificate, you can put that on LinkedIn, on your resume, and other places. And people know that, that guy spent some time, learned something, and probably he is capable of doing that stuff. So this is the first point. Then it validates that you can use the specific technology. So for example, if you are certified in Kubernetes, that confirms that you can do something on that Kubernetes. This is not just a simple line or that you worked with Kubernetes because you deployed some kind of lab or you watched a couple of movies on Kubernetes. If you are certified, then there is a confirmation, especially on exams like Kubernetes one, because as I will be talking about it, it's a practice-based one. The same happens, for example, for Red Hat certifications, which are also quite nice, I can say. Okay, I see that you want to test and validate your knowledge. You want to prepare for CKA. Okay, that's also a valid reason. And also to validate my knowledge. All says. That's great. Of course, if you are certified, you get more job opportunities. From my own experience, after you update your LinkedIn with new certification, you get plus 20 new offers the next day you publish that info on your profile. So yeah, there is nothing about it. And of course, it's a good reason to ask for a rise. If you are more certified, more qualified, that's the solid reason to actually get more money for your knowledge. Also, the nice reason, and one of the main reasons, for example, I renew my certificates, is to keep, it forces me to be up to date with the new technologies. Sometimes doing that on my own is quite hard because, okay, I can watch, for example, reInvent or once a year read what was new in the Kubernetes. But if you are forced to be recertified, then you need to learn all the new stuff that happened from your last exam, from your last attempt to pass that exam. And also, I think that certifications are a good way to structurize your path of learning. It's often quite hard to find what is important and what are the most useful features of the tool you are learning, or maybe what you should read in the beginning and then what's the next step. So I think it's a nice path for learning. In Kubernetes, I can say that you need to use a lot of things from ground up from your first day of usage of that Kubernetes, but it's not always the case. For example, in AWS, we've got a couple of levels of certification, and you are getting more and more specialized in some of the things that you find interesting. So this is why get certified. And I also want to spend a minute or two on why exactly a Kubernetes, why this is a technology I think you should get certified. So first, it's widely used and in-demand technology in the industry. More and more companies and businesses are investing into Kubernetes. There are also more and more tools released for the Kubernetes platform, because Kubernetes is at the moment not only the thing that hosts your containers, but also the whole ecosystems of additional tools, of additional applications, and additional ways to actually get your software quicker to the production, and also to write easy. I mean, and also to simplify the writing of the software. You may shift some of the features to the platform itself, so you don't have to spend time during the development of your application to implement such features. Kubernetes out of the box has quite good capabilities when it comes to scaling and management of containerized applications. Out of the box, you've got things like horizontal pod autoscaler, which we will talk on the next meeting. And this kind of constructs allows you to quickly provision the application and also enable scaling of that application. It's quite easy. You don't have to learn, a lot of things to just scale your application. Of course, this is under one condition, that the application is able to work properly in container, because this is not the case for all applications. Then when it comes to safety of your operations, Kubernetes is also a quite nice example on how it should be done. Kubernetes provides a way to automatically deploy new version, not only of your container image, but also of the configuration of that containers. So you can easily and reliably deploy the software, and in case something is not working with the new version, you can easily roll back to the previous one. So your operations are still, up and running, and application is available the whole time. The very strong selling point for Kubernetes is that it's platform independent. And by that, I mean you can run it in the cloud, any cloud you wish. I recommend AWS for obvious reasons, because I think it's quite nice deployment. And also it can run on premises. You can easily install Kubernetes. Okay, maybe I said it wrong. Not maybe easily install, but it's possible in definite time to install Kubernetes cluster and then manage it on premise. I don't think it's very nice experience. However, it's possible, but when we compare that to the cloud, it's totally different story. In cloud, everything is automatically managed for you, so you don't have to worry about a lot of stuff. But we will come back to that point later. And the third thing is actually the edge. Why I included the edge? Because I think the edge is a very specific platform. If you've got your servers inside the data center on premise and you are working in the same building, it's quite easy to actually, just in case, connect to the server with the console and then recover the cluster. In edge, it's a different story, because devices are usually in remote locations. You cannot easily access them in the physical way. I can say that remote access using things like SSH is also probably not the easiest way to do. And Kubernetes gives you some kind of peace of mind that you know that if you deploy the application to the edge and something is not working with the application, then Kubernetes itself handles that without your actual intervention needed. So this is very interesting case, and I really recommend you to install Kubernetes on Raspberry Pi just to try it. Then we have efficient resource management, and what I mean by that. Kubernetes has a couple of layers of abstraction, and by coordinating these layers and declaring, for example, this application needs that amount of virtual CPUs and and amount of RAM memory, Kubernetes allows you to optimize your infrastructure, your underlying infrastructure, like for example virtual machines. Using tools like Carpenter or Cluster Autoscaler, you are able to dynamically manage the size of the cluster, the size of the virtual machines. And for example, if your workload is going bigger, then Kubernetes can automatically adjust underlying infrastructure to match the demand for the capacity of your application. On the other side, for example, if your application is running mostly during the day, Kubernetes can shut down machines, tear them down, disconnect from the cluster, and scale down your application so you don't have to pay for unused capacity. So this is quite nice feature of Kubernetes, and I can say it's really well implemented. I mean, I did many of use cases like that. One I'd like to highlight is related to building of software. For one customer, I actually deployed the whole building process on Kubernetes. So for example, when developers came to the building at 8 in the morning and started to commit the changes to the repository, then Kubernetes automatically scaled up and simultaneously built multiple pipelines, multiple projects for multiple applications. On the other hand, if there was no demand for capacity and for building during the night, the Kubernetes scaled down that to zero. To zero. There was no instance at all, so you don't pay for that infrastructure when you don't use it. So this is really pay as you go if you configure that correctly. And then I can say that this is kind of stepping stone to learn other technologies. So basically, by learning Kubernetes, you are not only learning the single orchestrator and use it only just like that. Actually, the new world opens to you. And let's take the example of Istio, which provides you a whole new way of designing and developing applications. You don't have to, for example, care about mutual TLS, which is encryption end-to-end, because Istio can do it easily for you. You don't have to implement anything at all in your applications. You just tell Istio to do it. Also, when it comes to monitoring and tracing of your applications, things like Prometheus, Grafana allows you to skip the whole part for building building that features in application. You just need to expose your metrics from applications, and the infrastructure will take care about things like alerting, things like visualizations of that metrics, and many more. When you also try to develop new application, it's worth considering if the application should be done in the cloud native way. And by that, I mean, for example, it's usually some kind of problem where to store the configuration for the application, or maybe how to configure your application in the cloud. By using Kubernetes, you can use the features of that platform, like custom resource definitions, which we will talk about soon. And you can use it to parameterize your application and to make it more dynamic, and also skip some part with the configuration or storage of additional parameters. So that's actually my reasons that I think it's worth to learn Kubernetes. Last one. It's my personal one, and it's beautiful piece of software. I mean, not only in terms of the code, but mostly in case of the architecture. I mean, it's designed so nicely, and it's working, like a jazz band. There are multiple parts of that Kubernetes that just work with each other, and there is a beautiful music out of that. You can call me the nerd, but yeah, I think Kubernetes is beautiful when it comes to the architecture. Yeah. Let's move to the next slide, because too much love for Kubernetes is not good for a single slide. Then we've got a final question: why we should learn CKAD, not, for example, CKA? As I said, it demonstrates all the level that you can use the Kubernetes, but it's also, from my point, is recognized. Yeah, I talked about it. It's duplicate on the slide. I think it's important because CKAD covers a wide range of topics. You are not only focusing, on the simple stuff like what is the pod, what is the deployment, but you are actually doing some stuff that you will do every day using the Kubernetes on production. So it's very, very practical knowledge. As I said, it gives you kind of structured learning path to master Kubernetes. And I also think that it's more pragmatic than CKA. CKA has one or more domains that are focused, on managing the nodes itself. So it's more related to underlying infrastructure below the Kubernetes. And to be honest, if you are, for example, doing your application, deploying your application to the cloud, in most cases you don't need to know about that node. Of course, it's better to know that not know, but it's not that necessarily as on-premise. If you are not managing the cluster itself or provisioning cluster, the hard way on the physical hardware, probably you don't care about the details on how node authenticates to the control plane or some other technical details like that. So it's more pragmatic, I can say, because the domains we will discuss in a minute are more focused on that everyday job that you as a DevOps or a developer do every day. Next slide. Now let's talk for the exam. If you have any questions, just put it on the chat, of course. I'm looking from time to time to the chat, so after I finish some section or some deck, some slides, I will respond to that, reply to all that messages. And now let's move to the next section, which is the exam itself. So basic info about exam. CKAD is online only exam. You cannot actually go to the certification center and then ask them to do the exam for you. Unfortunately, I will tell you why. This is online only. Why unfortunately? Because you are responsible for all the things related, to organization of the exam, as well as, for example, for reliability of internet connection. In case of examination center, when something fails, for example, computer fails, internet fails, or anything else, it's not your fault. you can retake the exam without any additional cost, and they just let you to do it. In case of CKAD, it's online only. You need to organize everything by yourself and then do it from your home or from your work. What I really like about CKAD exam is that it's performance-based tasks. So this is not, simple learn and then memorize things and then, just respond to 40 questions and then you are certified. You actually need to understand how the things are working. You need to understand how to perform the basic tasks the exam asks you for. This is very similar experience to Red Hat ones. On Red Hat examinations, you also ask to do some of the practical stuff, like resetting root password. This is the first thing during each Red Hat exam, so it's quite funny. Here you don't have to do it, fortunately. However, I like that exams because they are not only funny, but they also prove that you actually can do it. So, for example, as I said, I ran 2 software houses and it was very important for me, and I looked, completely different when someone came with this Red Hat certification than, for example, any other that is only test-based. You get 15 to 20 tasks on your exam. They are shorter, or longer ones. It depends on the complexity on how many tasks you are getting. And what is important, you are running on a quite new version of Kubernetes, which is 1.26. If there is new version released in the meantime, it usually comes within 4 to 8 weeks, if I remember the documentation, and they update the examination infrastructure to adjust to the changes in Kubernetes release cycle. You've got 2 hours to complete that 15 to 20 tasks. You can say it's not a lot, but I think it's enough to complete that task. The tasks, are not very hard to do. In the future meetings, I will tell you what are the sample tasks, and we will discuss them in details, and we can measure the time. How long does it take to actually perform tasks like that? And the important thing about CKAD is that it's proctored. There is a proctor that you need to connect to, and you need to share both audio as well as video, as well as you need to screen share your computer. So actually, that guy or girl just watch your screen, yourself, and and all the sounds that may happen in your environment. And so it's quite important to prepare the environment. That will be on the next slide. Yeah, so this may be stressful, to have someone watching you the whole time. So you need to prepare for that as well. On the other hand, if you are going to the certification center or examination center, I can say that it's not as stressful because you don't care about the hardware, the internet connection, or other students that are also passing. But I don't know. Maybe that's me. There is a dedicated exam platform that you need to install on your computer. You need to pass a couple of tests, for example, for internet latency and connectivity and things like that. And then you are just using that platform to access the exam clusters and perform all the tasks. Next, what is important? There are multiple ways you can finish the task. For example, you can use the commands to generate that. You can, write the manifest yourself. You can include some additional data. So actually, this is not, there is only one good way to do it. And probably because of that, the results are emailed to you within 24 hours after the exam. So after you finish all the tasks, you are actually not sure if you passed or you haven't passed. And you need to get 2/3, 66% or above to pass CKAD exam. This is similar to other Kubernetes exams, actually. The examination and the certificate is valid for 3 years, so it's quite long, I can say. So it's quite nice. And the exam is priced quite high. I can say it's almost $400, so it's comparable or even more expensive than, for example, AWS Professional Certificate. I don't remember how much I paid for AWS Professional, but it was somewhere around $300. So it was less expensive than CKAD. But maybe that's the nature, of actually performance-based exams. So that may be the case. You've got one free retake, so that's good, and that's especially good if we take into account that something may fail, like your internet connection or like your hardware. So in that case, you can do a retake and then pray for things not to happen and not to fail again. So that's a nice thing from their side. It's also good, if you fail to pass on the first attempt, then you've got another free chance, I can say, to try again. So it's quite nice, I can say. Then what do you need to know about the environment itself for the exam? So actually you need to install PSI Bridge platform. This is a kind of application like remote desktop or something like that. You need to clean your room. Unfortunately, you need to take care about every note that you may have or on your desk or around your desk, or maybe if you have something written on the wall, I don't know, cheat sheet for Kubernetes or things like that. It's okay. It's not okay, I mean, to have a Kubernetes cheat sheet on the wall. You need to have good lighting. The proctor needs to see you whole time during the exam, and you also need to show him or her your room and your environment, so they can confirm that there are no notes, there is no additional laptop laying next to you, and things like that. You have to be in the camera the whole exam time. You cannot go to the toilet, or maybe if you bring camera you do, but no, joking. I'm joking. You need to stay the whole 2 hours in front of your camera, so the proctor can see you the whole exam time. You cannot do the exam in public spaces like coffee or co-working space and places like that. Of course, you need a good internet connection to handle both streaming of your video and audio, as well as streaming of the screen, and also to have quite low latency connection to get the remote desktop for you. Of course, no other people are allowed around you, so they cannot help you. And the very important part is that you need external web camera. Why is it? Because the proctor will ask you to actually show the whole environment, your desk, etc. So it's quite hard to do it, for example, in built-in laptop camera. And it also may be, quite hard to show the laptop itself to the proctor. So that's why they require external webcam camera. And I highly suggest that you don't argue with proctor at the beginning of the exam, and just prepare the the webcam before you start your exam. Of course, as with all certifications, and you need some kind of identification, and the proctor will ask you for that. You need to valid government ID with photo, name, and signature. Of course, with things like first name, last name, and other stuff. Sample documents, passports, driver license, national identity cards. But if you are outside, from Poland, I can say that you should check the details by yourself and make sure that these kind of documents are a valid one for the exam, especially if you are going through different countries. There are also some restrictions in, for example, war areas. You can do the exam, but from outside of territories that are in the war. Okay, we've got a question. Are we allowed to refer to the Kubernetes documentation page during the exam for commands? Yes, you are allowed to use official Kubernetes documentation, Kubernetes blog, and there was third website only you were able to use. But as I will show you in the next meetings, it's not often necessary. I mean, you just need to get the general rules for kube control, which is the main tool that you can use during the exam, and you can use a built-in help there just to read the couple of basic information about all constructs as well as generate a sample ones. But yeah, you are allowed to a couple of websites. What is important here, you can only have one browser tab. You cannot open 50 tabs and then switch from one to the other. So you need to keep everything in that one site, and also you need to take a special attention to outside links, so you don't click somewhere in the documentation and it gets you outside of official and allowed Kubernetes documentation. Okay, so we've got identification covered. And then in the second part of today's meeting, I will quickly introduce you to the main domains of the exam. And let's see what's next. And then we will end with some information about study group itself. Okay, so we've got a couple of CKAD domains. Maybe I will show you all of them. So there are 5 domains. As you can see, each domain has some kind of weight associated with it. And as you remember, we need to pass 66%. So actually, if you don't know one domain, in theory, you can pass. And this is it. However, due to the nature that it is, it's not the test that you can just skip the question. If you don't know the details of one domain, it may affect your task at the whole. For example, if you don't know how to create deployment or how to expose the service, it may mean that you are not able to do the task at all. So it's important to hone your basic skills on the very high level, and then of course if you forget some detail, that may be some points lost, but not the whole tasks. Albert is asking, maybe third one is cheat sheet. I need to change. I don't remember really today, but let's hope it's the one. Okay, so what we have in our application design and build domain. So actually, this is related to the designing of the application itself, how they should be, firstly written to the containers, what kind of things you need to take into account to have that application working correctly inside the container, how to create the application in the way that it connects with the environment around it. So for example, we can set all the configuration using configuration variables, environment variables, sorry. And this way you need to know that stuff in order to be able to design and build all that things. Regarding the building containers, we will spend some time on it. I will show a couple of best practices around building containers, and just to make you not worry about the exam, it's simply about building containers. It's not around designing the whole CI/CD pipelines on Kubernetes cluster. It's not like that. How do we do the task? Will we have a Kubernetes playground? Here, actually, there is on the exam you will have your cluster provided, so you just do all the tasks on the cluster that they will provide you in the version that I mentioned. And during our study group, I will provide you with couple of resources on how to create your own cluster, and also there are a couple of services that you can use in order to use some kind of sandbox in the cloud. I hope that answers your question. And then we have to understand jobs and cron jobs. Jobs and cron jobs are two things that you can use to automate some of the parts of your application. For example, if your application, needs to download data once a day, this is a perfect case to use the cron job. On the other hand, if your application is using some kind of batch processing, this is the place that you may use the job in Kubernetes. Of course, this is not perfect, and not all cases are good for jobs and cron jobs, and I will dive deep into that in one of the next meetings. Then we need to understand multi-container pod design patterns. I know that it may sound scary, but it's quite easy. It's all about, designing one pod that has multiple containers. Usually there is one main container with the application, and there are some helpers or sidecars that, do some stuff. And by that stuff, I mean, for example, download configuration, or I don't know, generate some templates, or maybe do things like networking for the container. This is a case for Istio, for example. The final point here in this first domain is to utilize persistent and ephemeral volumes. So actually, this is the case that we meet when we are migrating the applications to the cloud. Sometimes they sometimes they need to use some kind of on-disk data. And in that cases, we need to use something called volumes. And by using that volumes, we are able to store the data of the container. So this lesson and this area is all about, storing your data. This is not very dive deep. However, I want to do a little bit more than it's expected by the exam, so you can understand that in depth, and you understand the details on how it's working underneath. Because I think it's really important that it's always causes a confusion for newcomers to Kubernetes. The second domain is related to application deployment, and it's all about using basic things in Kubernetes and doing some kind of nice and popular patterns, like, for example, blue-green deployment or canary deployment. I know there are tools for doing that on Kubernetes, and you can do it automatically with the help of external tools. However, the exam asks you to do it manually. So actually, for example, for blue-green deployment, we need to figure out that we need 2 deployments and then scale that one to 0 and then scale up the second one somewhere to that point, or maybe use just one deployment with the proper configuration of the pods. So there are a couple of use cases here, and the exam curriculum asks you to know that. Then the second aspect of application deployment is actually how to perform rolling updates. Rolling updates are all about safety of the operation. In case something is not working in the new version of application, you need to be able to understand what is happening on the cluster, troubleshoot why it's happening, and also be able to roll back to previous state, to have the stable state of the cluster. I will also extend a little bit on that point, because there are some application specific things. If you are a developer and you are, writing your application, there are a couple of I can say, gotchas and possible issues that you may implement in your software that causes it to fail. One thing that happens very often are application migrations. This is a very tricky part when it comes to rolling updates. The next topic is using Helm Package Manager. I think Helm nowadays is critical piece of software for Kubernetes. It's hard to imagine deploying everything, manually, especially when it comes to the third-party software, because most of the popular software are distributed as a Helm charts. So I think it's essential to learn Helm and learn how to use it quickly and efficiently. However, I personally don't think Helm is the best way to approach that. For example, we've got CDK 8S, which is extended CDK from AWS, which allows you to generate Kubernetes deployments. But this is, just a side comment. You are not expected to know CDK for the exam, just to make sure that everyone understands that. The next area of the exam that you need to know is something related to application observability and maintenance. Regarding maintenance, we need to understand API deprecations. What is it? As Kubernetes is rapidly evolving and new version is released every couple of months, some of the things are transitions from beta to the stable one, and some things are deprecated, and you need to understand how to identify the things that are deprecated, how to change them or update the manifests for them, and what to do with the things that are completely deleted and deprecated from Kubernetes. So this is all about it. And then we've got a little with observability and a little with reliability, actually. And this is about implementing probes and health checks. Probes and health checks are the mechanism that ensure that your application is working on your cluster, and that there is, and not a single, I mean, there is no a situation that there are no pods to handle traffic for your application. This is also a mechanism that ensures that Kubernetes, when deploying a new version, knows when to actually shut down the previous one. So Kubernetes uses probes and health checks to make sure that new version is working before shutting down the previous one. Then we will use provided tools to monitor Kubernetes applications. This is not something very sophisticated. The exam does not require you to use things like Prometheus, Grafana, or any more sophisticated monitoring software. This is all about monitoring, and troubleshooting the application itself. So, for example, if something is not working, you should be able to identify the problem using, for example, tools to get Kubernetes events, or maybe inspect the logs for Kubernetes. When it comes to the logs, we also need to utilize container logs, and by that I mean you need to be able to get the logs for the pod to examine why, for example, application is failing. The exam itself does not require you to understand things like, I don't know, centralization of the logging or log shipping, nothing like that. It's just a simple getting of logs from the container. Then we've got debugging in Kubernetes, which is tricky part, but also not tricky in terms of the exam. We are not talking here about plugging additional debuggers remotely to Kubernetes. No, nothing like that. It's also more about troubleshooting than actual debugging. I don't know why they called it debugging. The next area, it's application environment configuration and security. And what we have here, here are the funny part. We actually learn how to use custom resource definitions. Custom resource definitions are additional things that you can create on your Kubernetes cluster, and they provide additional features for the cluster. So in order to pass the exam, you need to be able to identify if something is in the cluster, if the specific definition is installed to the cluster, and how you can use it and examine it on its structure. Then we have something which is not obvious for newcomers, but it's very, very important when it comes to production Kubernetes cluster. It's all about authentication, authorization, and admission control. These are quite advanced topics, I can say. So we will spend a little more time on that. Because there are a couple of basic concepts that you need to understand before we will dive deep into that. And the admission control is also a mechanism that is very, very powerful, but when used inappropriately, you can shut into your knee, or I don't know what's the idiom in English for that. Sorry. Then we have understanding and defining resource requirements, limits, and quotas. This is a nice topic because it allows you to do a cost optimization on Kubernetes. It's all about determining how much memory or how much vCPU your application needs. Because if you ask developer how much memory your application needs, they usually say, I don't know, I haven't measured it. But using Kubernetes, you are it's quite easy and quite quick. You can just read the values from the current moment and see, for example, the usage of the container. And then you can set your resource requirements appropriately, so the cluster can fit the size and scale automatically. When it comes to config maps, you need to know that these are the objects that holds the configuration. It's quite simple topic. It's just, about creating a configuration map object, and then about mounting that object to your pods. So this is quite simple. I will extend that again because, one thing is passing the exam, but I want you to be, good engineers and be able to do Kubernetes properly, because there is nothing worse than, going to the customer and seeing how many things are done in the wrong way. So I want not only you to pass the exam, but also to learn how to properly use that and, and do the right stuff. So I will extend that as well. Then we have secrets, which is a similar concept to config maps, but for something that is secret and confidential. Exam does not require you to know additional tools. However, I will quickly talk about that tools because I think in the production cases they are very, very important, and they can simplify your life a lot. Yeah, really. And finally, we've got something called service accounts and security context, which is also quite advanced topics. It's all about the identity you may assign to your pods, and then use that identity, for example, to authenticate to other services. This is about service accounts, and about service context is all about limiting and the capabilities of your container, or maybe extending them. For example, if you need your container to be able to restart the host operating system, then you need to know the security context and probably extend that. Oh, then I've got some issue with my presentation. Unfortunately, I hope I will be able to fix that quickly by just refreshing. Yeah, that's right. And the final domain for the exam are services and networking. So here we've got not only the basics like how to expose your application to the internet, but also we've got something called network policies. And this is kind of a firewall inside the Kubernetes. You may think of it as a firewall, but I think the maybe more accurate term is something called microsegmentation, because network policies work more like that. Then that area focuses on troubleshooting access to application. It's often the case that when you deploy the application in Kubernetes, you may encounter some kind of issues with connecting to the application itself. Usually these are quite simple things to fix, because it's all about matching the ports and matching the labels and other stuff. However, you need to be able to troubleshoot things like that. And because you may encounter tasks like that, because this is the perfect task for exam. If I were to create questions for that exam, that would be 100. I'm 100 sure that I would include that question in the exam. And finally, in this domain, we've got something called ingress rules to expose applications. Egress are a very nice tool because, if you are using load balancers for each and every service, it's quickly become very, very not cost efficient. However, you can use ingress to not only to reduce the cost, but also you may use ingress to externalize some of the things from your application to the infrastructure. So, for example, you used to implement things like certificates, TLS certificates in your application, or maybe authentication in your application. However, using ingress, you are able to do that on the ingress object itself. You don't have to implement that in application. And as ingresses are a built-in feature in Kubernetes, the exam is checking all that stuff if you know it. Okay, let me take a sip of water, because talking for 53 minutes is quite exhausting. Okay, if you have any question about the domains, then just simply write that on the chat. And now we will move to the final part, which is divided to the as a study group itself and the idea I have for that study group. So what's the agenda for that group, and what's the calendar, and when each and every meeting will happen. So actually, all of them at the moment are at 5 UTC. It's 6 Polish time on Thursday. And we've got the following topics and days. So on January 19th, this is the meeting we are having right now. It's Introduction to Kubernetes and CKAD exam. Then next week, we've got Kubernetes Basics Review. So if you actually feel that you don't know Kubernetes very well or you don't feel comfortable with Kubernetes, then I highly encourage you to join next week. We will review basics of Kubernetes, how it works, just a simple reminder of basic things. On February 2nd, we've got application design and build, which is the first domain of the exam. Then on February 9th, I will be skiing with my family, so we will skip that week. You may join me if you wish, of course. Then we've got application deployment, which is the second domain. We will focus on that stuff. Then we have on February 23rd, applications observability and maintenance. Then on March the 2nd, application environment configuration and security. And finally, on March 9th, we've got services and networking. And I hope soon after that you will schedule your exam and with the fresh mind and all that knowledge that you've just learned, you will pass that on the first attempts. I highly encourage you to think about the specific dates that you would like to pass the exam and probably book it, today or tomorrow. Because it gives you a lot of motivation to actually learn and actually to do that stuff. I know how it's with the certifications. If you are forced to do it, you then, for example, by your employer, then you do it. But many people find it also quite funny to just, for example, pass all AWS certification. However, I know the reality, and usually we don't have time. And probably from my point of view, it's also kind of motivation for myself to do that study group and learn again some of the basics that I may have missed. Okay, so we've got a question. I will come back to that in a minute. And the whole idea of that study group, as I said, there will be weekly meetings on Thursdays at 5 UTC. And I plan to run a couple of Q&A sessions. Probably they will be on Thursdays the same time, but we will see, and we will also see how many questions you may have. Then I've got a couple of additional materials for you. For example, I recently recorded a mini course called Introduction to Infrastructure as a Code. It's currently in my edit guy who is cutting that and editing that, and I hope to publish that next week. Of course, access to codes and samples and presentations and things like that's obvious, and study group materials, yeah. And you may ask why I'm doing that and how much is it worth. So actually, as I mentioned, I do on-site workshops. And I also checked how much the workshop is costing, in Poland today for the similar material and similar number of hours. And we need to take into account that we've also got a Q&A session with you can ask, and also some kind of bonus materials. So I checked that, and usually the prices are somewhere between that. There are 1 or 2 days workshops like that, so you can, on-site learn the Kubernetes. But I understand that it's quite a lot. I don't know if you agree with me that these kind of workshops, if your employer not buying for you, then probably you are not interested in joining them and paying with your own cash. So that's the case. So I decided that we are online, so I don't have to travel, and do an on-site workshop for you. And I like people that trust me, and that's also my plan to build some kind of educational empire and learn more and more people. So I thought about 140 euros, but then I said, no, it's first edition, so let's not go with that high price. I can always make prices higher. So I thought about 99 euros. Let me in the chat, what do you think about it? Is it too much or maybe too little for that for things that I mentioned just a couple moments ago? I'm really curious. What do you think about 7 hours? Not 7. Actually 15 hours of meetings, additional QA sessions, and materials. Do you think is it a fair price or not? Oh, you are thinking. I see. Don't be shy. Share your thoughts with me. And answering your questions, Kimo, yeah, all the videos from the meetings will be available. Also, as the Q&A session will be handled on Google Meet, I don't want to record that for privacy reasons. So I think we will not share that part. If you miss Q&A, then sorry. But all the recordings for the main sessions will be, of course, available for you. You can access that anytime on my learning platform. So it's a good price. However, I thought that for people that joined me today, I think that the price will be 85 euros because you joined me today. You were enthusiastic about my initiative to start such a study group. So if you want to join and be with me with all of the meetings, I'll also get all additional materials. I highly encourage you to just use the offer. I know I'm terrible at sales. I cannot do it. Really, I know technical stuff. I know Kubernetes stuff, but I'm shitty at selling things. So that's my offer for today. And the offer is valid until, if I remember correctly, Sunday. If you decide to join me, then just click on the link. You will also get, of course, some kind of email with that link and a summary of that offer. I hope you like it. What I can say next? Buying that is quite simple. Just click buy here and you are going to Stripe. If you need invoice or something like that, that's not a problem. Just put your data and that would be it. What I want to say more, the next meeting will also be publicly available for all of you and for additional people that may join in the future, because I'm advertising that meetings and that study group. So you are invited to join next week to review the basics of Kubernetes. However, as I said, the meeting starting from the third one will be only for people that will join to my premium premium group. And I also plan to run a Discord server so we can not only meet once a week for the regular session and also for Q&A, but you will be also able to chat with me or with each other on an everyday basis. If you encounter some kind of problem or need some additional information, something is not obvious for you, then of course you may watch that. You may ask on the Discord as well. I think that February will be a good time to start that. So for today, that's all from my side. I hope you found it interesting and you are less afraid about CKAD exam, as you already know what's inside that exam. If you have any questions related both to the exam itself as well as to my offer, you can write to Luktom Małpa Luktom Cloud, and then you can go to Luktom Cloud/CKAD maybe. Yeah, I will paste that link so you don't have to write that. This is the link. So you can write to me at any time. I will be here for 5 more minutes if you have any questions. I'm here to answer that. You may also write what do you think about the whole idea and execution from my side. It's quite new for me because, as I said, I used to sell online courses in pre-recorded online courses. This is a new formula. This is kind of, a hybrid approach where we don't not only have pre-recorded materials, but also the live ones and live sessions. So this is quite a new format, and I'm really interested if it's, something that you will find valuable. I hope so. However, let's check. So as I said, next week we will cover Kubernetes basics. If you are interested in Kubernetes or you just starting, I think it will be quite valuable and useful for you. This way you can learn the basics and start using the Kubernetes. And even if you decide that no, you won't join, I think you will be able to start preparing yourself. However, I can recommend joining us because it's a great motivation if you have other people that are also preparing. I'm in a couple of groups on Facebook and other forums that preparing for different certifications, and I see that this thing is working and it's better to motivate yourself if you have also your colleagues working with you. Okay, I see that people are disconnecting slowly and we have no meeting, so I think that we will finish today's meeting at that point. Again, you are invited to join me the next time. Also, I highly encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube so you will get also access to all the materials that I'm going to publish there. Thank you for being today with me. I hope we will see you. I hope I will see you next week and then in the study group itself. Bye bye. Have a nice evening or morning if someone's from California. Bye.